Ready to sew clothing from a pattern, but you just don't know what size to pick? Maybe you're not sure how to measure yourself accurately to get the right size? Maybe you have measured yourself, but you just don't feel like it makes sense because the size you're getting isn't the size you're used to wearing? Well, don't worry, all of that is totally normal, and I have a lot of tips to tell you about how to measure yourself properly and how to pick the right size when you're doing a sewing pattern. So let's go. Okay, let's just start by looking at one of these patterns we carry in the shop. This is the Metamorphic Dress by Sew Liberated. So if you flip it over, you'll usually find all the sizing information on the back. So this is going to be in inches because we're in the US. This is also in centimeters if you want that. Okay, so you'll see we have the bust, waist, and the hip measurements. Those are usually the three measurements that are going to be your three basic measurements. How do you measure yourself? You're going to take a tape measure and wrap it around your bust at the fullest part, making sure that it's nice and flat and going in a straight line around your body. Take that measurement and write it down. Let's skip the waist and let's go to the hip, because the hip is going to be very similar. You're going to go to your hips and you're going to measure at the biggest part. So this might be a little lower than you consider your hips to be, but just go to the biggest point, because we need to be thinking like, if this dress needs to go on, what's the biggest point it needs to go over? So find the biggest point of your hip and measure that and write that down. Now your waist is going to be found right where underneath where your ribs end. So it's going to be around your belly button, maybe just a little above the belly button. If you have an hourglass shape, it's going to be the smallest point. So bust is the biggest, hip is the biggest, and then that smallest point is going to be the waist. If you don't have an hourglass shape, just go for right below where your ribs end and right above where your belly button is, and that's going to be your natural waist, and you can measure there. Okay, now whatever your measurements were here, that's going to tell you what size you are up here. So let's say you actually had a bust of 33, a waist of 27, and a hip of 35.5. Well, that's very easy. You're a size 4. So maybe you are 38.5 in the hip, 29 in the waist, 34 in the bust. Well, which size should we pick? Should we do the 6, the 8, or the 10? Well, let's look at this actual garment and how it's constructed. Where is it the most fitted? Where is it going to matter the most? It's going to matter the most in the bust and in the upper body, because see how it's fitted here, but in the waist and the hip, it's got a lot of positive ease or extra fabric. So it's going to matter less if you pick the right size for down below. It's going to matter more that it fits up top. That's where it's going to be noticeable in this particular garment. So that's one way you can choose if your measurements are split between sizes.